All right. Well, it's May 18th, 2022. Welcome to the first ever Richfield Fire Department Local 1215 podcast, where we will have be presenting and talking about the fabulous career of Captain Dale Perrault, who will be retiring here soon. With me, here's myself. I am Firefighter Brian Wienholtz, will be your moderator. With me, I have Chief Mike Dobesh, Captain Josh Nelson, and our star of the show, Captain Dale Perrault.
I don't know about that, but thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So they just wanted me to kind of touch base on, my career here at Richfield. So I think it's going to just be informal questions and answers, and kind of to lay the timeline out. It was I started in 1990 here, November 19th of 1990, which seems like a long time ago, but you can remember that day you started. You remember you got the letter in the mail, the whole timetable. I could tell you exactly who was working that day. It was just, your dream job that came true, basically. I remember that. Pretty much back then, it was very similar to what we do now. There was a rescue truck and an engine company out of Station 1 and an engine company out of Station 2. Staffing level was 24. We had one assistant chief at that time, but we were a public safety model, I guess is kind of how it was. I don't know exactly our call volume, but I think it's probably about 2,100, 2,200 calls a year was kind of what it was. So I was the first. There were 4 people that they hired back then, not at once, but during that year, and that was the first introduction where we actually had where you did a 40-hour work week. So it goes way back to then when we started that. Previous to that, your first day you started a 24-hour shift, and that's just how the ball got rolling. But they thought that having that 40-hour work week was kind of a way to, you get to meet and greet everybody. They train you hard that first week. So that's how long we've been doing that. Back then it was basically the same. We were firefighters. We had trucks. We put fires out, hoses, SCBA, full turnout gear. The only thing different is city government was different, I feel. We didn't have email or memos. We did all our reports longhand. There was one computer in the station that wasn't connected to any network or anything like that. Lots of file cabinets for inspections and everything like that. So that's the biggest thing, is from when you started to where we're at now, I guess, is one thing. On the east side, you road rescue the majority of your early part of your career. Rescue went on all the calls. The call volume wasn't there. The engine went on fire calls. We did a lot of inspections back then, so that's why the engine in the daytime was out doing the inspections and that kind of stuff. Progressing forward, wasn't a lot of turnover rate back then. You were stagnant. We didn't have a lot of promotional tests and stuff until there were actually openings. That didn't change till later in my career, when they started giving tests every 5 years or whatever. 2 years is what it was. Kind of morphed into it. So yeah, very stagnant. You were a firefighter. They kind of evaluated everybody individually. If you came from a paid on call model, or if you could prove that you had experience, driving trucks and stuff, you were in driving the engine. They wanted to get everybody up to speed to cross-train them as fast as possible, just for a callback system, because they wanted, when you show up for a callback, that you could do that. So that was a little different back then. The majority of the training was all in-house training. Wasn't a lot of money in city government, or they didn't spend a lot of money on that kind of stuff for going to FDIC and all the outside training and stuff. Budgets were tighter, I feel, back then. They ran a tight ship, I guess, when it came to money in city government all together, I feel. Yeah.
in the time that you've been on, going from now backwards with our call volume more than doubling from when you started, has the city growth and the population growth reflected that change in call volume at all?
Uh, so you're saying the growth of this?
Right. Yeah. Has there just been a population change? Have you seen just more activity, more residents, or was it? It's pretty densely packed now. Was it this way 20, 30 years ago?
Well, no, the high rises, so the high rises, 66 in Lindale were all there and stuff, but everything was kind of like 3-story, residential apartment buildings. None of the high rises that we're starting to see around here like that. I feel the biggest part, me and Mike were just talking the other day about this, is just, you know, as decades go by, how, back when I started, there weren't like lift assist, it was like families taking care of families or neighbors taking care of neighbors. And there might have been a lift assist, it might have just came in as a fall and stuff. It was just, we went on calls that were, the majority of them, when people called 911 back then, it was a 911 call because they really didn't have any other options, I feel. Where now a big percentage of our calls are, we don't know what to do, let's call 911, which is fine. It's because, we can go and help and assist or whatever. And that, but that's a big part of our calls versus back then. I feel we actually went on when it was a heart run. It was probably someone who was really, having a heart attack or a stroke or something. That's one component of it, but then also too, in population density, more traffic on the freeways. We're going on more accidents. But then other things have kind of changed, the structure fires. We don't go on, I don't feel, as many structure fires. Seems like back when cars and stuff in the winter time were carburetor, we went on more car fires versus now technology has kind of changed there. But yeah, that's one big component that I see different.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition in the fire department, specifically from moving out of the public safety model and kind of becoming our own standalone division within the city, and how that impacted firefighters throughout the job, as well as the administration of the department?
Sure. So we were public safety when I started here, and I don't know exactly when it started, but I think it's probably the mid 70s. And it probably went through maybe 2000, I guess. But to put it in today's standards, we were under the police and us for public safety director, which was usually like a police chief. The director of that was the majority of the time was a sworn officer who came up through the ranks. So, and then we would only have, it'd be currently like our assistant chief would report to the public safety director, which today would be like our police chief. So, we always felt like, we were, the redheaded
Sorry.
the redheaded, stepchild, basically. We were always kind of the bottom feeder. Police got a lot of stuff because your leader is police driven, and he didn't know anything about fire, didn't really kind of care about fire, but did. So you always kind of felt like you're a second fiddle, basically. And there wasn't the communications, our assistant chief would go meet at their department head. He would be the messenger. He'd bring back the message and be like, yeah, we can't get that. Everything that you guys asked for, we can't this and that. It just didn't seem like it was a good system. There wasn't a lot of strategic planning. It was just kind of a Band-Aid thing. We did the job, but the equipment wasn't like our equipment today. Our trucks were a little rusty, just city government does not function anything like it does today, in my opinion. So it was frustrating on our part. And then, if you're not a big city department like a Minneapolis or St. Paul, there was only a handful of full-time suburban departments at that time. So you always kind of felt maybe the threatened of it, that you were like, okay, if we need to cut, let's cut it and fire because there's other options out there, So you always kind of had that threat, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So there was really not a big advocate for us. So that's why we just became an advocate for ourselves. Our union was strong. We were politically involved. We were loved by the community, loved by politicians, just because. And we didn't do anything different than we're doing now. It's just that's our way of getting the satisfaction that we needed back then, So, I think the best thing that happened is when you finally did separate that police and fire, you had an advocate, you had a director at the table, and then you can start building this fire department like it should. Slowly but surely, everything in government moves pretty slow. So, that was step one of many steps to come. But here we are, 22 years later, and we can see kind of where we were and where we are now.
So that's been a positive change.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, yeah, no, it's a positive change. I would not recommend. And there's so many different public safety models out there and stuff, And it wasn't like we invented it. Burnsville had one, they switched out of it. There's the goofy stories out there. Police detectives would carry turnout gear in their truck, in the back of their trunk of their investigator car and show up. There's all these goofy models and stuff like that. So,
do you remember what the big push was to separate fire from police?
Well, I think it all comes down to timing is what it was. I think they finally got our message. And at the time, you had maybe a police chief, public safety director that was retiring. You had a changeover of a city manager. The city manager had family who was, from a different state, but their father-in-law, I can't remember the whole story, was a battalion chief or something. So, she got it. You were bouncing ideas off her, and she's like, yeah, I talked to my father-in-law over the summer. It's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. That's just how the ball gets moving, but it's all about, timing. If you didn't have that person leaving or that city manager or the connection, some people get our job and some people don't, so it's all just based on salesmanship.
Sounds like education too. If we're not educating our city managers and city officials on what we do and our needs of our job, how are they going to know?
Well, exactly. Yeah, and that's what kind of caused some of the riff, I guess, is that, for whatever reason, if they didn't want to fund it or they didn't understand the job, but then, we're liked by the community, we're liked by the politicians. So then you got to toe the line too, right, because it kind of comes back and haunts you, and it did a couple times on that. I remember one example was because budgets in city government are highs and lows, so they have unfilled positions. And our public safety director always goes to city council meeting, and there were 2 police officers that they were down, and we were down 2 firefighters. And it was like that for, a year or whatever. Well, it was like the 11th hour of the council meeting. One of the council members said, I just want to make a motion. I want to fund the 2 firefighter positions, but leave the 2 police positions open. And like the public safety director just walked right out of that council meeting. The opposite of what he wanted, but just being connected to the right people kind of helps your cause, I guess. And they got their positions filled anyway, so it was just step one. But people with egos have a hard time,
What? So the union obviously has a strong foothold in Richfield. And what was kind of the biggest change for the organization as the union started to recognize the political power, and then we started to move away from the public safety model into the director model?
Yeah, even though we thought we had a big influence and stuff, we just stuck together as a group because you always kind of felt threatened. Okay. We were always kind of, felt that threatened of, just stupid little things that they would say, and it's meaningless. But the problem is like I've always said around, you guys have heard me say this, the fire service in Minnesota is just kind of, it's messed up. There's so many models out there. There's no consistent model of how every city does it, except big cities. Now you're starting to see it, and decades later, finally, they're kind of adapting the Richfield way, in my opinion. All these communities are going to the Richfield way that we've had for forever, just because they're forced to. So, I think the biggest thing is, if you work with labor management, it's like a relationship, you're not going to agree on everything, but you can come up with an agreement and be civil about it, and then there's an understanding of why it's not going to work or it is going to work. So I think that's the biggest thing there. It's like a marriage in a way, You can make your marriage easy, or you can make it hard on yourself too. So there's a balance in everything in life, So I think that's step one in everything. But yeah, that's the biggest transition is that. Well, and then individuals' personalities. If you have a strong personality, back then it was a public safety director, and we had a strong individual of a union president, and then egos get involved and heads clash, and that's just not healthy for the long term. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, but even if you really did win, there's a raft to pay down the road possibly. So pick your battles, I guess. So, yeah, I think that's everything. You're not going to agree on everything. What makes departments and stuff are, money makes the world go around, and that's a big part of it. When it comes to everything, equipment, staffing, buildings, yeah, you can have a wish list as long as you want, but you might not get it all.
What, just kind of going back to your intro of you starting in November of 1990, like what got you into the fire service? Like why firefighting? Why making it a career?
Well, I was that person who kind of knew, not so much fire, I guess, but, I had family that was, in law enforcement. So, and then I grew up in a small town, 12,000 people in a ring suburb of North St. Paul in the East Metro. But a traditional downtown kind of reminds me of Hopkins, but on the east side of that, So the fire station right downtown. Well, you heard the siren go off. You would kind of know what's going on and stuff. So then I worked in town. So then you knew a lot of the part-time volunteers back then or whatever. So you kind of asked questions and stuff. Well, we had a couple police officers, they had their own police force too, that were on the department. So my intention was to be a police officer. But then I thought I'll get on the fire department because that'll build your resume and stuff. Well, then as soon as you start doing that, it's like, screw that, I'm not going to be a cop. So then you got more and more invested, and it's like, this is cool. But the numbers weren't there, You just assumed at St. Paul, Minneapolis, you didn't know of all the other ones until you started kind of digging into it. So you just thought, like, I'll just be a St. Paul firefighter. And your backup plan was, I can always be a cop. I hate to say that, but not so much that you could always be a cop, just the numbers of cop jobs versus fire jobs that were out there. Sure. That's what I mean. You can always be a cop, the sheer numbers.
Well, and back in the 90s, it was St. Paul, Minneapolis, Rochester, Duluth, Richfield,
St. Louis Park.
St. Louis Park, yeah, because they hadn't transitioned yet to their get on call.
Yep.
And then Coon Rapids.
Coon Rapids and Mac was the only one, but you needed to have that military background for that. Yeah, that was your only option. And then St. Paul at that time had a hiring freeze. So I took one test, but then back then too, you guys probably, they had all the core challenges. Yep. So there were no women on St. Paul at that time in the early 90s. Yep. They didn't hire women until like probably mid-90s or something. But that was part of the core challenge. So you were on a list, probably deep, would have never got hired anyways. So then you started looking at other options, every test that came up. So I took this test and the Coon Rapids test, scored pretty high on it. I knew where Richfield was, just proximity-wise, but, just because, that stadium, the airport. So I took both of those tests, Coon Rapids, scored pretty high, and I think whoever hires me first will probably go there, Yeah. that's kind of how it shook out, I guess.
I'm glad it shook out that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, me too. Once well, and then as soon as you started here, we're going back to that November day. I can tell you who worked here and stuff. As soon as you did this job, it's like, okay, I've got no reason. I mean, I didn't even think like, well, this is just a stepping stone. When St. Paul finally gets their act together, you really didn't even think that. You might have thought it when there was highs and lows of like, because there was a lot of skepticism or senior people like, don't get too married to this job. Sometimes we're on the chopping, just stupid stuff like that. Even though you probably really weren't, but you always just kind of felt threatened. But St. Paul had the same thing. Everyone had budget problems and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's kind of
Cool. Another question I have for you. So I know you were heavily involved with being on the union executive board for years, and then also with your work with Minnesota Task Force 1, you've been able to meet a lot of other either union leaders or firefighters throughout the state. What would you say, like, we talk a lot about culture, especially recently in Richfield. Where would you say, like, the culture in the Richfield Fire Department is compared to other organizations you've interacted with?
Well, I think our culture has turned over, probably 180 degrees from when I started here. Not that it was bad or anything, it was just a different culture. There was, we had a percentage of people that, maybe disgruntled employees, do the minimum, didn't feel, and it probably was part of it too. They didn't feel like they were, they knew in-house they were appreciated, but they just didn't feel appreciated. So then that just became kind of cynical behavior and that kind of a trickle-down effect, And so you can kind of see how people are influenced by culture, I mean, that's a big thing, And if you could have actually, people could start there and get sucked into something that really isn't true. That's just that one person's viewpoint, I guess, So I feel our culture has changed 180 degrees to what it was, But being involved like that, yeah, that just opened your eyes up from being exposed to, other good things of other departments, other bad things of other departments. And you can do that by being on the union board, going to conventions, networking with other people. The Minnesota Task Force opened up that also, networking with St. Paul, the Minneapolis guys. Yeah, it's a great experience. I encourage it. And even though you're on the union board, what kind of got you started was like early in your career before you became on the union board, that we got negotiations and stuff. You were on the negotiation committee. So that was kind of step one of getting on the union board and whatever, it was kind of, and I don't know, I remember Larson talking to me, just saying like, hey, are you interested in doing that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you do? You're just young, dumb, and stupid, It's like, well, just sit back and observe, but we think your personality would be good at the table just to kind of like, whatever. Because they were trying to change that culture a little bit, Our previous union president was this hard knocking, hard charging, we'll file a grievance just because we can type of mentality. And it was good on some things, but bad on other things, So that was step one. But yeah, I think it's all been positive experiences by networking with other departments. And it shows flaws in other things too. Even today, we kind of know the difference between our department, the Dynas. Not to knock Minneapolis, I feel we got a lot of good stuff, but we know it's a bigger department that cannot transition as fast as we. A lot of culture. From where we are to where they'll be will be decades, just because,
Takes time.
This is how we do it. They still traditionally don't even do positive pressure just to ventilate true smoke out of there. They still suck smoke out of their house. And that's how they've always done it, Even laying hydrant lines, They could get by doing it a different way, but there's always that one case where we still want to do it this way just in case. So those are things too that you don't like to see. It's like, dude, you just try it. You might like it. You know, it's not, you know, it's so.
So Dale, one of the things, and with your experience on the union board, as well as just kind of being kind of the wise sage of the Richfield Fire Department, you've been trusted by both administration and by the current union leadership, as well as just the newest firefighter on the job, right? I think you're probably the most respected person within the organization. So first of all, congratulations.
There's been a lot of people before me.
Well,
done that too.
But I think the reality is, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast was there's so much knowledge, so much stuff that you've got in your head that there's no way we could ever do a podcast and capture it all, right? But what would be the word of advice for anyone that you would give just to prepare them for a positive future within the organization, whether they're in management or they're new on the job?
Well, I think looking back for me personally, you know, I always liked this job. You know, I always enjoyed coming here. So I think a lot of it's just attitude. You know, I think it comes down to individuals. You can drive the bus whichever direction you want, you know. So if you have a good attitude in life and you are positive, and if you can take a problem and identify it and try to make it better, I mean, why would you want to come to a job and make it worse, or be the person who complained about it? Or, I mean, it takes a long time to change things, but I think that's just the key right there is, you know, try to make it better. I mean, it's everything, you know, we give our little things, you know, instead of just saying like, oh, that's broke, you know, that's a bummer. It's like, well, you know, see it, own it, fix it. If you can, figure out what you got to do to make it better, I guess, you know. I mean, I think that's part of it. You know, just be positive, and yeah, I mean, that's my biggest thing that I think in life that you kind of do. I mean, there's really no problem that can't be solved, or figure out how to pass the buck to solve it, or come up with, you know, if it's money, it's like, you know, that's where I think the difference back with like city government and stuff, there just wasn't strategic planning. There just wasn't, everything was just a Band-Aid, and it was kind of frustrating, you know, where, you know, it's not working. You know, why are we keeping these trucks 25 years? You know, why don't we keep them 20 years and then go down to 16 years? Well, we find that kind of is working now. You know, we could have just said like, whatever, that's not my pay grade, you know, even though it's a dumb idea. You know, if you want to keep doing that, it's on you. You know, it's like, well, why not just be part of the solution and figure out what, you know, how to fix it, I guess, you know.
So, you've been around long enough to see, like you mentioned before, the culture change here at Richfield, and not just in our attitude towards other departments and city officials and stuff, but just how we do things operationally as a fire department. I mean, it's changed even since I've been here in my short time. Where do you see the future of the department headed, or where, I guess better question would be, where would you like to see the department headed? You know, what things would you adjust or change, or like to see us course correct for the future?
Yeah. I mean, it always comes down to money. If money's not an object, obviously staffing is nice. I mean, we're a 9-man shift versus the other. Just that extra person, you know, that's huge in my opinion with the number of calls we go on, the double headers, having that third guy at station 2. You know, that's step one of many steps to come, you know. Just ride trucks like, you know, St. Paul, Minneapolis. Just
Right.
Big cities. Most people run 3-man engines, 4-man engines. You know, so that would be step one, I feel, is just keep that ball rolling, try to get the staffing level up to where it should be, you know. You know, I like what I see here. You know, I like that we keep progressing and stuff. Like I said, I started in 1990, still pulled hose, we still put out fire. you know, you probably look back and you're thinking like, ooh, that wasn't a great idea, but it worked, you know. So, and I like all the stuff that's out there because we're in a technical world. We didn't have videos. We didn't watch videos. We never critiqued, you know, or looked at
We had American Heat.
Yeah, you had American Heat, basically. Exactly. You know, that. Yeah.
Old enough
Right.
to remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not.
And you watch Squad 51
Right.
at lunchtime or whatever, you know, so you'd see that. So I think just what you see out there now, the fire service is changing, progressing, and it's always been positive, I feel. Just the opportunities out there for training for everybody. I mean, we've got a lot of smart people that are in the fire service, I feel, you know, with new ideas, better ideas. And I like, too, that it's a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it, more, you know, it's not, so we're a military operation, but before, back in the day, you know, chiefs brought ideas to the captains were the messengers and stuff. Yeah, but that's how it was, and if you're just some young rookie, you know, you sit in the back seat, don't say anything until they tell you what to do and stuff. Where I just like our department where everybody can kind of spitball ideas. Well, let's try it. If it works, it works. If it makes it better, let's fix it, you know, and that kind of stuff. Where, you know, don't do that. We're not doing that, you know. I kind of glad that those days. I mean, if it doesn't make, but then there's also too a thing. I just hate to change the change too. If it doesn't make it better, let's don't change the change, you know. But if there's something that's positive out of it, you know. I mean, the call volume thing is, you know, it's a drain on the system, but you know, that's our job. I mean, you know, every department is a little different. You could even take Minneapolis. There's engine companies that go on as many calls as we go on the whole year, one engine company, and then there's some that go on 1,500, you know, but they bid their engines, so you know, it's just part of the job. And some people like it, and some people don't. So, but the nice thing about it is our flexibility. You're not on the same truck. You're not getting beat up on a medic rig 24/7 your whole career for the first 10 years. Yeah, so, but yeah, I mean, I think the fire service in general is changing. Everyone is strapped by recruiting people, hiring people. I'm thinking it's going to plateau off eventually, just because every department's not going to be competing for the same people. So hopefully that plateaus off. Guess the key is, you know, once we create a list, just hire the person right away. I guess you're going to lose them to someone else.
What are some things you've done to stay healthy and to stay fit your 31 plus year career? I mean, that's a big deal, right? Because typically we hire fit people and they retire worse off than when they started. But I would just looking at you, you're a fit guy, seeing you on the fire ground, you do work, you're not scared to do work. So what are some things you've done to keep that mindset of staying fit?
I think it's the individual itself. You know, you're a driven person. You know, even on your days off, you're a busybody, so that helps. I'm not a lazy person, whatever. You know, I mean, I can't say I eat awesome, but I eat good on my days off. You know, but you don't want to be someone who's crazy because then it takes the fun. Because we all know food tastes so good. You know? So I don't want to be that person. But you just try to eat well, I guess. You're the best you can, but you have to splurge in life. And then I think just working out. You know, motion is just positive. You know, my wife's active. We enjoy going for walks and bike rides, and so I just think that, and if you keep doing that, I've never really had highs and lows. It's like, oh, I fell off the bandwagon. You might have fallen off the bandwagon a little bit, but you've always just kind of been an active person your whole life, and you know, I think that's the key right there. You know, knock on wood. Still got 3 days left, but you know, I've never had a significant injury on or off duty. You've had aches and pains and minor stuff, and I do construction on the side, so it's kind of a lot of close calls where you might have fallen or whatever. But I think that's also too, by staying active and healthy, that you can stand up and shake it off, and you know. by working out too, we've always kind of had some kind of a workout facility, not as good as what we have now. But I always just had the mentality, it's like, you get paid to work out, why wouldn't you work out, you know? Even though it was a pain, you had to run down to the basement at the old station, and a delay in response time getting up. But I don't know. I think just staying active, I think, is the key, and then that translations over to the job. And then you've never been afraid of doing work. I've never had that mentality. It's like, you know, if we're pulling ceiling, well, you know, I can have 2 people do it or 4 people, but if 4 of us do it, we're out of here twice as fast, you know. Not going to sit back and point toward a pull ceiling. You guys all know how to pull. You don't need me pointing, you know. Right. You need me pulling.
You know, along with that physical fit stuff, and with, you know, nowadays in the fire service, I guess all over, you know, the mental health crisis we have in public safety. You know, have some of the things that you've done throughout your career that you've been able to manage the mental aspects of the job and not letting it get to you, and you know, obviously burnout hasn't been an issue for you because, you know, you got a 30+ career. You know, what are some of the techniques or things that you've done, whether it's just being active or whatever, that has helped you deal with the mental aspects of the job?
Well, I think part of that being active, I think that's part of what drives you also. You know, I think that's just kind of your decompression, I guess. For me, at least personally, you know, where someone might, you know, go read a book or something or whatever. I just think it's just kind of gets those endorphins out, get your mind off of it, listen to, you know, music or podcast or something. And, you know, so the mental health thing's a big thing. I mean, I've learned more about mental health in my last 5 years than I did your whole career. You know, everyone stuffed it before. Everyone just never talked about it. But I guess someone gave me advice a long time ago. I heard it somewhere. I can't even remember who it was. But, you know, we get called to an incident, but you just got to have the mentality. Is there anything you could have done to control what happened? You know, so you just got to kind of have that. There's nothing I could have done to control it, so let's try to make it better. And then kind of, you know, the outcome's the outcome. You know, if you did everything you could to make it better, you know, that makes you feel good, I guess, you know. And as you get older, it's tougher, I feel, just because, you know, you're more mature, you got kids, so then you start putting, you know, names and faces with what that family's going through, you know. But maybe when you're younger, you go on a bad call or a full arrest, you see family grieving and stuff, but it really wasn't. That's probably hard for me, is to see the impact of.
You didn't have that.
Yeah, you didn't have that personal and that, you know, just those emotions. Or sometimes you're going in, like before, you would never think anything of going to a call. It's like, okay, you know, here's where we're going. You know, here's what we're doing. But now you're going there, it's like, oh man, I hope it's not ... you know, just because you kind of know from your past practice what it could be or whatever, you know. So, but yeah, that's kind of how you deal with it, I guess, you know. And you talk about it. The biggest thing is communication. I mean, I got a great spouse who, you know, at first in your career was always like, oh, any cool calls? Now it's like, hey, you know, any good, or whatever, you know. Last night, how was last night? How was yesterday or something? You know, it's just more. But before it was always, you know, hey, cool calls. Yeah, I think use the opportunities. If I ever thought I was going to, you know, compared to like earlier in your career, just what's out there. You know, if you ever thought you were going to a dark place or getting depressed, or, you know, I would never not reach out. Or, you know, there's just so many services out there, you know, and I would encourage anyone to do that, you know. I mean, we're all wired different. We all process stuff different. We all handle stuff different. And so you just got to also remember that there's services out there and not everyone processes it the same either.
Got to know your limits.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're about, 45 minutes in, give or take?
Give or take.
I think we could probably sit here and talk for hours.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think, you know, we recognize certainly, Dale, that you've had an extraordinary career. And I certainly, I want to express my gratitude for what you've brought to this organization in that career. Like I said, you are without a doubt the most trusted member of the organization. So thank you for that. And hopefully you won't go too far away, and you'll come back and enjoy coffee with the crews on occasion, and certainly stop by and help me out as much as you have in the last couple of years. So I want to just express my gratitude as we kind of wrap things up a little bit, and I'll kind of let Josh do the same thing now. So
Yeah, I echo what Chief said. I mean, you were my first lieutenant when I started here, and 9 years ago, and learned a lot from you just watching you, and I think you definitely echoed or put into practice what you said earlier. If there's a problem, fix it, like own it. And that's been huge for me. And just your knowledge that you have of every building in the city, and tactically sound decisions. I think we all aspire to do that. And and I took over for you as treasurer on the board back in 2015, and I know I was in your ear constantly for those next 2 years, trying to fill your big shoes with what you did on the board. So I appreciate that from you. And, yeah.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, guys. That's nice. But I mean, a lot of people who were here before me, did the same for me, and like I always said, even like during your interview process when you're going for lieutenant and captain, kind of the same thing. You sat back, you watched the people who had good ideas, you watched people who had dumb ideas, you watch personalities. It's like, okay, I like a little bit of him, but I don't like that. That worked, that didn't. So take a little of all that, mix it together, and try to come up with something that, So, I mean, this department's been around way before me, and, we just want to keep the momentum going in the same direction that it's going, I feel. We don't want history to repeat itself. But I appreciate the kind words.
Well, we appreciate you sitting with us and sharing your knowledge. I definitely speak for everybody in saying that you made it look easy.
It's been a good run.
For sure. And we all, to reiterate what Mike said, don't be a stranger, come back and visit us, but we wish you like the best of retirement. So
thank you.
Well deserved and well earned.
Yeah. No, I will, you spend 1/3 of your life here when you're working here. So, yeah. I'm not going to be here every week for coffee, but and I'm always a text away or phone call away. So don't be afraid to reach out, vice versa.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, that'll wrap up our first Richfield Fire Department Local 1215 podcast, and keep your ear out for many more to come. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
thank
Thank you.